As a photographer, she has documentary proof of the events of the Holocaust. She fought the Nazis for 2 years, living as a partisan in the woods. She dedicated her life to telling the stories because she wanted people to know that Jews fought. As her grandson, I have the responsibility to retell and share these photographs and events. Faye's my bubby. Faye was my bubby. When I think about her, the first thing that comes to my mind is those times that I spent with her as a child. Her warm smile, her warm hug. I'm reminded by the joy that she had. The way that she would share playfulness with us and the way that she would just celebrate this new life that she had been able to build.
I'm 100 years old and I have a kosher meal.
On April 26th of this year, my grandmother passed away. Her last word is mishpocha, his family. If I could speak to her now, I would just tell her I love her. I don't think there's anything more important that I could say. My bubby was born around 1920 in a small town in eastern Poland called Lenin. She was a devoted, doting daughter. In her large family, she had 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and 2 younger brothers. She had a special relationship also with Baruch, her youngest brother. She took care of him. He was sweet, gentle. Whenever she spoke about him, it was with tears in her eyes. Her eldest brother, Moishe, was a photographer. He's the one who taught her her skill that saved her life. The Nazis invaded her town when she was just a teenager and forced the Jews that were remaining into a small ghetto. Most of the men, including her 2 older brothers, Moishe and Grainum, were shipped to forced labor camps. The Nazis, they would come through and just terrorize and murder people for no reason. Photographers were rare at the time, and the Nazis were obsessed with documenting, so she was forced to take on duties as a photographer. The day of the genocide, my grandmother was singled out. She was marched to the synagogue. She didn't know whether or not she was going to be killed or what was going to happen, but she found herself inside with 5 Jewish families, all of whom had been selected for their skills. From the windows of the synagogue, though, she was able to see her entire town marched off to be shot and thrown in the graves. It's 1,800 people, including her father, her mother, her 2 older sisters, her older sister Sonia's 2 twins, babies, and her 2 younger brothers, Kopel and Baruch. She heard the gunshots. In her dark room, she developed a roll of film, and in it she saw these 3 mass trenches. These graves bled for days, like open wounds. As the earth shifted under the dead bodies, the blood would spill out. She made copies of some of these photographs for herself, for her own documentation. a group of escaped Russian partisans came to the town and attacked. As soon as she heard the gunfire, she dashed off into the woods, into the swamp. The partisans were a group of different people who engaged in guerrilla warfare to disrupt communication, to disrupt transportation, to disrupt the flow of munitions to the front lines. When they had the opportunity, they would fight back without reserve. They felt they had nothing left to lose. It was difficult for a young woman to join a group, but she wanted to fight. The commandeer knew that she had been a photographer. He knew that her brother-in-law had been a doctor. And so he said, "You will be a nurse." Despite having no training, despite being absolutely squeamish, an order was an order. She nursed one man back to health, a man who had had his neck blown out by shrapnel. And she spent days by his side, feeding him drops of egg yolk. He recovered and he became, again, a brave partisan. The commandeer himself often asked her to take photographs of certain events. Some of the photos, they're all black and white. The resolution is terrible. They're smeared, the edges are frayed, but they tell of a time that needs to be remembered vividly, and they have life in them. In order to keep everything safe, in order to get through the 2 years that she spent in the woods, she had to bury her equipment, plus all the photographs of her family before the war and the tragedies of the trenches. Once she had a rifle of her own, once she had the opportunity to fight back, she felt so much power. She fought because she had to. She told me several times, actually, that she never killed anyone. I'm sure that's not true. My grandfather, he was a commander in the partisans. He had actually had a previous wife and child who were murdered. After the war, she was reunited with her 2 older brothers who had also survived and fought. She met my Zadie, and they were married shortly after. Later on, they came to Canada. She was able to find joy and distraction and diversion in her life. But she never forgot the murders, and she would cry herself to sleep every night, almost till her death. She was always committed to telling the story of the Holocaust. She spoke at a number of campuses across North America, and she met the Israeli parliament. In Jerusalem, she would speak in schools, in synagogues, in churches, various congregations of various faiths. In many cases, these photos document a time and an experience that there exists no other evidence of at this point in history. It's so important that these stories are told and not forgotten, because mistellings of the events of the Holocaust and denial of the events of the Holocaust are all too common today. She would be disturbed by recent events related to anti-Semitism and Holocaust denial, and invigorated by it as well, to continue telling her story and sharing her evidence. And I'm sure that she would want me to do the same. I have so many feelings thinking about what her story and what her influence should be on me, what she would want. In many ways, it does give me strength. It gives me purpose. It gives me motivation. The most significant influence that she could have on me is the values that she held so dear: knowledge, education, family, connection, goodness, joy, celebration. So many things that make life worth living.